The sterile white walls of the fertility clinic felt like they were closing in on Isabel Marino as she sat across from the doctor. Beside her, the hand of her husband, Daniel Whitmore, grew cold and lifeless in her grip, like stone. 3 years of trying, 3 years of hope dissolving into despair with every single line pregnancy test. And now this moment, this cold clinical room, would define everything that followed. "I'm sorry, Isabel," the doctor said gently, though his voice was clinical. "Your test results show extensive uterine scarring from your previous surgery. Natural conception will be extremely difficult, if not impossible." The world tilted. Isabel had feared this moment, prepared herself for it even. But hearing the words spoken aloud knocked the wind out of her chest. She turned to Daniel, looking for comfort in his face, the same comfort he once always offered. But he just stared straight ahead, unreadable, distant. "What are our options?" Isabel asked, voice hoarse. "IVF could be attempted," the doctor replied, "but the success rate is low, given the scarring. There's also surrogacy or adoption." "We'll think about it," Daniel interrupted abruptly, standing as if he couldn't bear another second in the room. "Thank you, doctor." The car ride home was suffocating. Isabel leaned her forehead against the window, watching the streets of Chicago blur past. Streets where they once dreamed of raising children, pointing out homes with swing sets and big yards. Now, it all felt like a cruel joke. "Daniel, we need to talk." "Not now, Isabel. I need time." But she saw it, in his eyes, in the way he wouldn't meet hers anymore. The retreat, the disappointment, the quiet resentment. As if her body's betrayal was a broken promise she'd made to him. At home, Daniel walked straight into his office and closed the door. Isabel remained in the kitchen where they once imagined helping their kids with homework, and slowly sank into a chair, her hands trembling. The front door flew open. She didn't need to turn around to know that voice. "Daniel called me," Vivian Whitmore announced as she swept into the room like a frost storm in pearls. "He told me about your situation." Isabel bristled at the word. "It's not a situation, it's a medical condition." Vivian's ice-cube eyes narrowed. "From where I stand, it looks like you've failed the most basic function of a wife." The words landed like punches. 3 years of subtle jabs about grandchildren, comparisons to other daughters-in-law. But this wasn't passive aggression, this was pure cruelty. "That's not fair." Isabel stood. "I didn't choose this." "Didn't you?" Vivian hissed, stepping closer. "You knew Daniel wanted a big family. It's tradition. The Whitmores always have children, and you can't even give them one." Fury flared in Isabel's chest. "Tradition? That legacy you speak of is a failing real estate company. Daniel works himself to death trying to fix the mess your husband left behind. What exactly are we preserving here?" Vivian's face flushed. "How dare you? How dare I tell the truth?" Isabel snapped. "You want to talk failure? Let's talk about how you raised a son too weak to stand up to you." The slap of Vivian struck her, sharp, humiliating. Isabel reeled, hand rising to her burning cheek. "You will not speak to me that way in my son's house," Vivian hissed. "This is my house too," Isabel replied, quietly, though even she wasn't sure that was true anymore. Heavy footsteps thudded from the stairs. Daniel appeared, disheveled. "What's going on?" "Your wife," Vivian said smoothly, "was just explaining why she believes she still deserves to be your wife, despite her inability to fulfill her most basic duty." Isabel waited. For a defense. For something. But Daniel said only, "Mom's just worried about our future." Not even a glance. Not even a hand on her shoulder. And in that moment, Isabel knew something inside her cracked beyond repair. After that night, Isabel needed no further confirmation. Daniel didn't defend her, didn't fight for her, didn't even ask her to stay. The next morning, he left a check on the kitchen table and walked out like they were never married. He packed in silence, no tears, no begging. Isabel didn't leave because she was weak. She left because there was nothing left worth holding on to. The studio apartment in Edgewater barely measured 400 square feet. The paint peeled off the walls, the radiator groaned like some old dying animal every night. But to Isabel Moreno, it was hers. No mother-in-law, no silent, absent husband, just herself, a few worn clothes, a second-hand armchair, and a wound that still bled beneath her ribs. A week after Daniel signed the divorce papers, Isabel was folding laundry on the cold wood floor when a wave of nausea hit her like a truck. She barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting violently. At first she thought it was stress. Then, maybe something she ate. But by the third time at night, curled up on the floor in the dark, tears streaking her face, a single, terrifying thought sparked through her mind like lightning. No, it can't be. She pulled up her phone calendar, counted the days. The last time was the night before Daniel said it was over. One last night. She thought it was reconciliation. Turns out it was goodbye. The next morning, she stood in the pharmacy aisle, hands shaking as she picked up a pregnancy test like it was a live grenade. 3 minutes felt like forever. When the timer rang, she looked. 2 lines. Her hand dropped. The test clattered to the floor. She sank against the bathroom wall, silent tears pouring down. Not from fear, but from the cruelest irony. 3 years of trying, 3 years of heartbreak, and now this. She called the temp office where she worked. "I need the day off," she murmured. She spent the day in her tiny apartment, crying, laughing, shivering. By twilight, a single sharp thought cut through the fog like a lighthouse through a storm. Daniel deserves to know. Whatever he had done, whatever they had lost, he had the right. Her fingers trembled as she dialed his number. A woman answered. "Hello? I'm looking for Daniel Whitmore. Is he available?" Pause. Whispered voices in the background. Then the woman returned, voice now frosty. "Daniel doesn't want to speak with you. Please don't call again." "Wait, I just need to..." Click. Isabel tried again. Blocked. Number disconnected. That weekend, she drove to the Whitmore estate on the north side. Vivian opened the door, every inch the society queen. Perfect hair, pristine silk blouse, pearl earrings. "What are you doing here?" Her voice could freeze water. "Daniel won't answer. I need to speak to him. He's moving on, as he should, and I suggest you do the same." "Vivian, I'm pregnant." The silence was a punch. Vivian didn't look shocked or pleased. She looked calculating, then cold. "Pregnant?" she said softly. "And who exactly is the father?" Isabel swallowed. "Daniel. The baby is his. So you claim." "I'm not claiming, I'm telling you." Vivian stepped closer, pointing a manicured finger at her chest. "You're a desperate woman clinging to a man who's finally free of you. Try forcing this fantasy onto him and I swear, I have lawyers, money, and influence. I'll bury you and I'll take that child from you if I must." Isabel looked her straight in the eye, and she knew Vivian could, and she would. "Fine," Isabel whispered. "I'll go." But as she walked back to her car, she wasn't the woman who came to beg. That woman was dead. The one walking away now was a survivor, and deep inside her, for the first time in a long time, a flame flickered. "I won't disappear. I will become someone they'll regret ever crossing." Isabel returned to her tiny apartment, carrying a decision that could never be undone. Even abandoned, even utterly alone, she would keep these babies, not to hold on to a man, but to hold on to herself. And from that moment on, she knew. She wouldn't just give birth to 2 children, she would give birth to a new version of herself. The day Isabel gave birth to her sons, a snowstorm hit Chicago like a fist of ice. Everything came earlier than expected. The contractions, the ambulance, the glaring delivery room lights. For a moment, somewhere between the beeping heart monitors and the nurse screaming for the doctor, Isabel was sure she wouldn't survive. Then came the cries, soft, shaky, but alive. Leo came first, tiny and red. Mateo followed, so small he fit into the doctor's palm. They were both rushed to the NICU. Isabel only glimpsed them, never touched. "They need oxygen," a nurse explained, vanishing with the incubator. She lay there, alone, blood still beneath her, the room as silent as a grave. A few days later, she was discharged, but the twins stayed. Each morning, Isabel rode the city bus to the hospital, sitting for hours beside the glass incubators. Each heartbeat on the monitor was a whispered prayer in her head. No family, no friends, just these two fragile reasons to keep breathing. One afternoon, while folding tiny paper cranes near Mateo's bed, a woman sat beside her. "First time, Mom?" the woman asked gently. Isabel nodded. "Twins, born nearly 2 months early. I used to be a nurse here. Now I run a center for single mothers. We've got classes, doctors, childcare support. Cheap too, if you ever want to study." Isabel nearly cried. The woman's name was Marcia Delling, and she became the first life raft in the ocean Isabel was drowning in. Thanks to Marcia, Isabel earned a partial scholarship at Chicago School of Law, night program for single mothers. During the day, she worked temp accounting jobs, napping in break rooms. At night, she studied family law, child rights, domestic violence statutes, every rule that could protect women like her. She wasn't just studying law, she was studying survival. She took notes beside incubators, read case law in the hospital cafeteria. She once thought her career ended the day Daniel left her. Now she realized it had only just begun. 4 months later, Leo and Mateo were strong enough to come home. Home was a cramped apartment, but warm with lullabies and clean blankets. Every smile from Leo, every tiny grip from Mateo was a victory. There were nights she fell asleep mid-bottle, nights she cried when tuition was overdue, nights she washed dishes in silence for a second job, but she never stopped, because something was growing inside her, alongside her sons. Belief. 3 years passed. Isabel graduated. Her graduation day came with no flowers, no proud relatives, just 2 sleepy babies in a stroller, smiling up at their mother. The next day, she started work at a law office focused on defending abused women. A year later, she was a guest speaker at a conference on legal reform and gender equity. People started saying her name, people started listening. She had once been the woman left behind. How? She was the woman helping others stand again. Isabel Marino, mother of 2, young attorney, and symbol of what it means to be knocked down but never stay down. 6 years is a lifetime, long enough to build a home, raise 2 children, and rebuild a woman from ruins, but short enough for an old wound to start bleeding again, with just one message. Isabel Moreno stood in the kitchen, her shirt dusted with flour from baking class with the boys. Leo giggled near the oven. Mateo ran around the table with a cookie still covered in powdered sugar. The kitchen was warm, chaotic, full of life, a perfect little world she'd crafted with her own hands. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something told her to pick up. Isabel. Just one word, just her name spoken in that voice, and her heart stuttered. "Daniel?" A pause. "I wasn't going to call," he said. "But I just wanted to know how the boys are." Isabel stared at the wall, at her children, playing, laughing, never knowing the man on the other end of the line. She didn't speak, she just hung up. 10 minutes later, her phone lit up again. "I'm sorry." She stared at the words, then let the phone drop to the table. That apology came 6 years too late, and worst of all, it meant absolutely nothing. The next morning, the real blow didn't come through a message or a call. It came through the morning news, while she packed school lunches. Businessman Daniel Whitmore engaged to Elizabeth Carrington, only daughter of real estate tycoons Carrington and Doyle, wedding to be held next month in Chicago. At first, she thought she misheard. Then the screen lit up. Daniel in a tailored gray suit, arm around a blonde woman, both smiling for the camera, gleaming, untouched. The kitchen fell eerily still. Leo called out, "Mom, the cookies are burning." Isabel blinked, shaken back into the room. "Sorry, sweetheart. I'll get it. But inside her, the image looped like a cruel reel. Daniel, smiling, his hand on Elizabeth's waist, a place that once belonged to Isabel. The pain didn't explode. It didn't scream. It just sat there. Heavy. Cold. Like someone had quietly shut a door and locked it from the other side. That night, she sat alone in the dark, her boys fast asleep upstairs. The TV still flickered. The engagement footage from another angle. Flashing cameras. Champagne glasses. A violin quartet. No one mentioned his past. No one asked about the two children who shared his DNA, living just a few blocks away. She pulled out her phone, opened the old message. "I'm sorry." She stared at it, then typed one word, "good," and sent it. She didn't need a reply. Didn't care if he read it. She just needed to say it, for herself, like closing a book you once thought you'd read forever. She looked around her living room, the worn sofa that still held Leo and Mateo's drawings taped to the fridge, the tiny jacket hung by the door. No, she hadn't been forgotten. She'd been discarded. So she could become the very best version of herself. Daniel could marry that woman, she didn't care. But he would never forget that there once was a woman who broke for him, then stood again, without ever needing him to pick her up. Rain fell lightly that afternoon, a soft, cold drizzle over Chicago, as if the sky itself was holding back something it couldn't yet cry out loud. Daniel Whitmore's wedding was held at the most luxurious hotel in Chicago, the Whitmore Grand, a symbol of the Whitmore legacy at its peak, even as its foundations had quietly begun to crumble. The grand hall shimmered under chandeliers of hand-cut crystal. Every table was an artwork of white orchids, Dior-scented candles, and vintage French champagne. Cream-colored ribbons tied each napkin, embossed with the couple's names in golden cursive, Elizabeth and Daniel. Outside, guests arrived in sleek black cars. The press lined the velvet ropes. Chicago's elite from real estate, law, and media worlds filled the seats, whispering about the power couple of the season. Through that world of glass and gold, Isabel Moreno stepped out of a faded taxicab in a black clutch dress, elegant but stark, her lips painted in deep red, her dark hair in a low bun, her presence unshakable. Beside her were Leo and Mateo, dressed in miniature tuxedos, their small hands in hers. They didn't fully understand what was coming, only that Mom has something important to say today. As she approached the front entrance, a security guard stepped forward. "Ma'am, do you have an invitation?" Isabel looked him straight in the eye. "I'm family of the groom." Her voice wasn't loud or confrontational, but it cut through the air with precision. A manager nearby recognized her face, eyes flickering. He looked away and subtly nodded. The doors opened. Isabel stepped inside, slow and steady, every heel click echoing like a countdown to something no one saw coming. The ceremony began. Strains filled the room. Elizabeth Carrington, radiant in a cloud of white lace, moved gracefully down the aisle with the composure of someone born into the world of spotlights and expectations. Daniel stood tall, smile practiced, his tuxedo crisp, every inch of him calculated. Vivian Whitmore sat in the front row, velvet gloves, a half smile frozen into porcelain. The officiant began, "If there is anyone who objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." Silence. Then, heels on marble. Click, click, click. Keys turned. Isabel emerged from the crowd. Calm, controlled, dead center in the aisle. "I do." The air shattered. Daniel's face went pale. Vivian gasped. Elizabeth froze mid-smile. Isabel stepped forward, her voice sharp but measured. "I don't object out of jealousy. I don't object because I want him back. I object because this man is standing here, promising love and honor, while he has two children he's never even met." A gasp rolled through the room. Phones lifted. Cameras clicked. The silence was over. Daniel stepped forward, tense. "Isabel, this isn't the time." "No, you don't get to decide that anymore," she interrupted. "I've been silent for 6 years. I was silent when you disappeared. I was silent when your mother threatened to take my children, when you never called. But today, before you build a life on a lie, I will speak." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. DNA test results. Your name. Your children. A recorded threat from your mother. 2019. A copy of the letter she wrote, forcing my silence in exchange for divorce. "And these," she lifted 2 photos, "these were your sons. Their first birthdays. You missed them." She placed the evidence on the altar. No one moved. Elizabeth clutched her bouquet. "Daniel, did you know?" Daniel stared at Isabel like he was seeing a ghost, but it wasn't her haunting him. It was himself. I meant to tell you," he stammered. "But you didn't," Isabel said, "because it wasn't convenient, because you cared more about appearances. Your mother, this woman beside you. You were afraid truth would stain your perfect life, but you forgot truth doesn't disappear just because you silence it." At the back of the hall, Leo's voice rang out. "Mom, is he really our dad?" The entire room turned. Daniel froze. Isabel knelt beside her sons, hands around their shoulders. "Yes, sweetheart, but he didn't choose you. I did." Mateo blinked up at her. "Are you sad, Mom?" She smiled. "No, I'm proud." She stood again. The guests no longer whispered. They stared. Not in scandal, but in awe. Vivian tried to rise, to say something, but her lips trembled. No words came. Isabel turned to leave, Leo and Mateo by her sides. She paused only once, right in front of Daniel. "You're not their father by blood, not anymore. You lost that title the moment you walked away. Fatherhood isn't biology, it's a choice, and you chose to run." Daniel couldn't speak, couldn't move, just stood there. Just like 6 years ago, silent and powerless. And that was all the closure Isabel ever needed. Because this time, she was the one who walked away. The rain had begun that afternoon, fine, cold drops sliding down the windows like slow, silent trails of everything that could no longer be held. After the wedding fell apart, Isabel thought she'd feel relief. But no. What she felt was emptiness. Like she had settled an old debt, but her soul hadn't fully been released. Then, weeks later, Daniel showed up. She opened the door. He stood there, soaked in rain, his wrinkled suit clinging to him, in his hand a small, poorly wrapped gift box. His eyes, sunken, hollow. Gone was the polished man who once commanded rooms. This was just a man, fragile, trembling, lost. "I'm not here to beg forgiveness," he said, voice hoarse. "I'm not here to start over. I just want to know, are they happy?" Isabel didn't invite him in. She stood in the doorway, blocking his path, her eyes unflinching. "They are," she said slowly. "They've grown up, surrounded by love, by truth, by laughter. The only thing they lacked was a father who had the courage to stay." Daniel looked down. Rain dripped from his hair onto his collar, mixing with something that might have been a tear. She hadn't planned to say more, but when he extended the small gift box, his mouth starting to form a sentence, her hand moved before her heart could speak. She slapped him, hard, clean, no hesitation. The sound of her palm against his cheek cracked through the quiet air, sharp and sudden as a knife slicing through the rain. Daniel froze, his face turned with a force, but he didn't resist, didn't flinch. Isabel lowered her hand. She stood still, her heart pounding, but her voice was steady. "That slap isn't for today. It's not because you came here. It's for the 6 years. 6 years of silence. 6 years I swallowed my tears. 6 years I carried my babies into emergency rooms at 2 a.m. not knowing if they'd live till dawn. 6 years of standing in courtrooms alone, no lawyer, no backup, just me and 2 boys. Daniel didn't move. His eyes were glassy, but he said nothing. No excuses, no defense. Isabel looked at her own hand. Her palm still burned, but inside she felt something strange. A loosening, a release. That slap hadn't come from rage. It was a goodbye, a full stop at the end of a chapter that had lasted too long. She stepped back. I don't hate you anymore, but I also don't need you anymore. Daniel inhaled, trying to stay composed. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he whispered. I just want to do something right, even if it's too late. Isabel nodded slightly. Then start by not expecting forgiveness just because you feel guilty. He nodded, quietly, then pulled 2 small envelopes from his coat, handwritten, neat. One for Leo, one for Mateo. You don't have to give them now, only when you feel the time is right. Isabel took them. She didn't promise. She didn't decline. She simply accepted. Daniel looked at her one last time, then turned, walking into the rain. He didn't look back, and this time, Isabel didn't either. She closed the door, leaned against it, closed her eyes. One last drop fell from her lashes. Rain, or the final tear. Inside, Leo and Mateo's laughter rang out from the living room, fighting over the TV remote. A different world, warm, real, and full. She smiled, took a step forward, the 2 letters still in her hand. That slap wasn't revenge. It was a severing, the final cut to a thread that had bound her to the man who once broke her. It told her everything she needed to know. I survived. I rose. And now, I am free. 3 months had passed since Isabel walked away from that wedding. Nothing changed overnight, but slowly, her heart began beating to a new rhythm. Gentle, steady, peaceful. She was in love, not the kind that came with fire and drama, but the kind that felt like coming home. Julian, a kind-hearted resident doctor with warm eyes and steady hands, was now quietly part of her life. He didn't ask about her past. He saw her now, a strong mother, a woman once broken but never destroyed. He didn't try to rescue her. He simply chose to walk beside her. For Isabel, this love wasn't to fill a void. It was to walk forward together, not to escape loneliness, but to open the door to light again. And Daniel, he was learning how to live, truly. After that fateful day, Daniel began therapy. He sat down with his own silence, faced himself, finally. He wasn't chasing redemption. He was trying to become the father his sons could believe in. Leo and Mateo began to speak to him, not every day, not with ease, but enough to plant hope, short calls, awkward questions, a whispered goodnight. Tiny things, but they meant everything. Isabel didn't interfere. She let things grow in their own time. She no longer held anger, but she didn't open doors out of pity either. She simply stood firm in the life she had built with her own hands, and for the first time in years, she wasn't looking back. She was walking forward, not because someone led her, but because this time, peace was her choice. A late afternoon, Isabel sat on the wooden bench in the small backyard garden. The trees whispered in the golden light, and lavender swayed gently in the breeze, its soft scent filling the air. In front of her, Julian was kicking a ball with Leo and Mateo, their laughter rising like music, wrapped in sunlight. Her eyes followed every movement. In her gaze was peace, love, and a quiet, overwhelming emotion that almost brought tears to her eyes. But instead, she smiled. On the table beside her sat a thin folder, legal adoption documents. Julian would be their father, in name, in heart, in every part of life. Not a replacement, not a substitute, just a man who had chosen to step in and love them with everything he had. Isabel picked up the pen, signed her name. No hesitation, no doubt. Just one signature and a lifetime promise behind it. That night, after the house had gone still, she sat at her desk, A blank sheet of paper lay before her. She began to write, not to anyone else, but to herself 10 years ago. To Isabel, age 25. I know you're hurting. I know you're shattered. You don't believe you'll ever rise again, but you will. Not just rise, but become someone you never imagined possible. You will love. You will forgive. You will trust again. You'll raise 2 children with love and wisdom. You'll walk through darkness without needing to be led, and one day you will wear a crown, not of gold, but of fire and diamonds, because you were forged and you did not break. You will wear a crown forged in silence, pain, and persistence, and it will shine brighter than any gold. Isabel set the pen down. The letter didn't need to be mailed. It had lived inside her all along. She stood, turned off the light. Outside, the stars blinked quietly across the night sky. A chapter closed, a circle complete.